But I'm glad to be here. I'm really excited to be speaking with you guys, and I'm really excited about this year in Liberty. I'm very optimistic about the future of the Libertarian Party. I'm going to scoot this way real quick.
That's actually a good idea.
I don't want y'all to feel left out. So, I was thinking about what to speak about today, and I'm going to start with a quote. This is from the autobiography of Malcolm X, and this is going to be the foundation of what I'm going to talk about today. So, he's talking about when he was younger with his brothers, how he would get what he wanted. And he's talking about how his siblings didn't get what they want, and he talks about the difference. So he says, quote, "I learned early that crying out in protest could accomplish things. My older brothers and sister had started to school when sometimes they would come in and ask for a buttered biscuit or something, and my mother impatiently would tell them no. But I would cry out and make a fuss until I got what I wanted. I remember well how my mother asked me why I couldn't be a nice boy like Wilfred, his older brother. But I would think to myself that Wilfred, for being so nice and so quiet, often stayed hungry. So early in life, I had learned that if you want something, you had better make some noise." I'm going to repeat that last part. I had learned early in life that if you want something, you had better make some noise. The Liberty Movement needs to make noise. For that, we need noise makers. Last night, we had a presidential debate talking about national issues. But one of my main focus as a journalist, as a commentator, much of what I write has to do with local politics. My better half, Donnie, and I have been traveling over the past 12, 13, 14 months all across the country, talking to people who are being abused by their local and state governments. And as we stand here today, we are at a critical moment in America, in the liberty movement. We are on the precipice of descending further into authoritarianism. If we want to stop that, yes, we do need to focus on national politics, but the way to effect the most effective change is at the local levels, paying attention to what's going on in your local communities. We're so concerned about the swamp in DC, the deep state. I guarantee you, each and every one of you has a deep state and a swamp right in your backyard.
That's right.
I just mentioned your government, but even in your cities too. And they're getting away with all kinds of malfeasance because we don't really pay attention to what goes on with our mayors, our city council members, our sheriffs. We're focusing on what the president's doing, what Congress is doing. Again, that's important. But there are so many ways that local governments abuse people. And if we want our local governments to serve as a bulwark against federal overreach, then we need to show up local communities. I'll give you an example. You guys have an assault weapons ban now. When that was first passed, over half of Illinois sheriffs said that they were not going to enforce it. That's why it's important to have people at the local level who will not carry out the bidding of the authoritarians who run our states and our federal government. But in order to get those, we need to realize that our local governments are corrupt too. But guess what? It's much easier to change those governments and to push back against them than it is the federal government. You know, there was a story back in Texas, in San Antonio. Donnie and I spoke at a protest there because the state of Texas and the city of San Antonio wanted to steal a man's bar using eminent domain. We went out there, Donnie and I both spoke. They organized a huge protest. We made noise. And it was a hard fight. And they ended up having to pay him more than what they wanted. It wasn't quite what he wanted, but they had to pay him more than they first offered him to steal his bar to make some additions for the Alamo Museum. Eminent domain is an issue, but it's not just done at the federal level. It's done at the local level. Making noise changes things. Some of you may have heard of an organization called You Are the Power, started by Spike Cohen, and I've collaborated with them. We've collaborated with them to get people's stories out. if there's any organization that's about making noise, it's them. There was another story in Georgia, and actually there's two stories like this, but I'm only going to talk about one, the Hernandez family. The state child protective services regime is stealing and kidnapping people's children under false accusations of child abuse. The Hernandez family had this happen to them. They took their baby in, their little daughter, because she was having some issues. They had her examined. There were some injuries on her ribs. And they said, oh, yeah, guess what? You're abusing your child. We're going to take both of your children, and we're going to arrest you. They charged the mother. They later charged the husband. As a condition of the bond agreement, husband and wife can't even see each other. They can't communicate. This happened, I believe, mid last year. It's been months and months and months since this couple has even been able to communicate directly. They can't see their kids unless it's supervised. The mother just got the right to be able to have a 1-hour visitation once a week with her child. By the way, they took this little girl, Emma, to other physicians, specialists, who said she has a genetic bone condition. That's why she had fractured ribs. Not because she was being abused. It's because there were issues there. They told the courts that, the court didn't care. And this couple is in disarray. And there has been progress made in this case, but these are only, this is just a small smattering of the stories that we've heard of. So this brings me to my point about making noise. Now, we're the third largest political party in America, but we're a very distant third place. Republicans and Democrats control everything. And they rigged the system, like Lars Mapstead was talking about, through ballot access, or lack thereof. And it's hard for us, it's hard for us, isn't it? It's hard for us to make the inroads that we need to make. It's harder for a libertarian than it is for a Democrat or a Republican. It's hard to win hearts and minds. A lot of Americans don't even know what a libertarian is. A lot of them still think that libertarians are Republicans who smoke weed. Which is weird, because I know a lot of Republicans who smoke weed and they're still Republicans. But here's the thing. That's why I talk about focusing local. The level of influence that we will have as a movement is directly tied to the value that we bring to Americans. Nobody's going to follow us if they don't value us. And if we want to be valued, we have to be valuable. This is where making noise comes in. If somebody's bar is going to get stolen by the city and the state, who's going to show up? Democrats ain't going to show up. Democrats only show up when somebody who looks like me gets shot by the police unjustly. And that's good. They should be fighting for that. Republicans, I mean, other than January 6th, I can't think of a lot of demonstrations that Republicans have done fighting for their rights. I take that back. In New Mexico, when that authoritarian hag passed that, or tried to ban guns in Albuquerque, they showed up then, so I'll give them some props for that. But in general, they don't. If somebody's bar is going to get stolen, who's going to show up? We did. Libertarians did. There were a couple Republicans there, I'll give them that. But in general, no. Who's showing up for the Hernandez family in Georgia? Nobody. There's a pastor in Gastonia, North Carolina, Pastor Moses Colbert. His city is giving him a hard time because I understand how horrible this is. He was feeding and clothing the homeless. I know, it's awful, it's awful. And he's a pastor at that. I mean, it's not like it says in the Bible that you're supposed to feed and clothe the homeless, but they're giving him a hard time. They put all these fines on him. They have threatened him. The organization called You Are the Power came in, and they're helping him. They're making noise. They're trying to get them to back off. And I interviewed him for an article that I wrote for Red State. And here's what struck me. And I didn't ask him, I didn't prompt this at all. He said to me, I'm a black man. I've been a Democrat all my life. And now I'm a libertarian. That's the ticket right there. Yes, it's good to have online platforms. It's great to have podcasts. It's great to be very online. I have an online platform. I'm not knocking that. But if we're really going to move the needle, we've got to provide that value at the ground level. We need to be the ones who show up when the police harass people for no reason, or when the state wants to steal land and property through eminent domain, when they want to steal your property through civil asset forfeiture, because there aren't a lot of other people doing this. That's our way in. And yes, it is a long-term focus. This is not going to happen overnight. The two-party uniparty didn't form overnight. It took time. But I would encourage you to start making some noise. If you know of something happening in your community that is wrong, do something about it. Now, I get that not everybody can show up to protest. Not everybody has an online platform, but everybody has something. There are limitless ways that we can make noise and fight for the average person. When this continues to happen, people will see, oh, well, libertarians, that's our brand. We're known for showing up when the government wants to get froggy. That's what we need to be known for. Not just our ideas, not just our debates, not just our academia. That's all well and good, nothing wrong with that. But we need to be on the ground. We need to be talking to people. We need to be letting these governments know that they can't just push us around. People think that the government is an undefeatable foe. It's not true. There have been plenty of times where they've backed down. Whether it's You or the Power or other organizations, we can get them to change. And when that happens, that's when people will understand what libertarianism is. I don't want to tell people what libertarianism is. We need to show them what it is. When you've got 20, 30, 40 people protesting in the square in San Antonio against eminent domain, that is an example of what libertarianism is. That is putting into action what people like Frederick Bastiat wrote, Mises, Hayek. You know all the thinkers. So my call to action here is, while we're focusing on pushing liberty, think about how you can be doing that at your local level. If you don't know what's going on, go to your city council meetings. If you can't go, a lot of them record it. Watch the recording. If they don't record it, then there's a cause for it, right? They should be recording it, because you have the right to know what your city government is doing. If you're not able to protest, maybe you have friends that you can talk to. Maybe you can build an online group. Maybe you can build a group in your local community. Maybe you're loaded and you can donate to people who are doing the work on the ground. that wasn't a hint. So this is where we need to be going as a movement. Again, nothing wrong with focusing on national politics. I enjoyed the debate last night, but I guarantee you that everybody on that stage would agree with what I'm saying right now. I know Reckenwald wasn't able to be there, but I've heard him talk about this. He wants to use his candidacy to start focusing on local, because that's where the change is going to come. The federal government is irredeemably corrupt. We're not changing that anytime soon, if ever. The only way our federal government changes is if it disappears or breaks down. But we do have more influence and control over our mayors, city council, county judge, sheriffs, all of those. So to me, that should be our hyper focus, getting the right people in office and getting the wrong ones out. Because when the state is kidnapping children, it's because it's being allowed to by the people who run it. We got to get those people out. We have to be the ones to educate the public about what's happening. That's what making noise means. It means doing what we need to do to call attention to what the government is doing and sending that message to the government that we're just not going to take it. And you know what? That way we might get a lot of these Republicans and Democrats who are disaffected with their party. Because I don't think I've met a Democrat or Republican who actually likes their party. I don't think I have. And if I did, I would think there was probably something wrong. Right? Yeah. So to me, these are people that we need to be going after. We need to be going after all of Americans. I don't care if they're LGBTQ, black, white, Hispanic, blue, yellow, orange. Well, there is an orange guy who might run the country. No, but still, hey, let's go after him too, you know? But that's the thing. We need to reach the people who don't have voices. Neither party does that. The people who I mentioned who are being abused by the government, they didn't have voices until people like us showed up. People like you showed up to say, no, we are going to help. We have got your back. So, if there's anything that you take away from this, I would highly encourage and even beg you to think about ways that you can start making noise and contributing to the people, to others who are making noise. We must be the noise makers. And I got that quote from Malcolm X. He made a lot of noise, didn't he? He affected a lot of change, didn't he? He wasn't the only one. Martin Luther King Jr., others. There have been plenty of people who have made noise. There's this one guy, you may have heard of him, who really blew up the libertarian movement. A guy named, his name's Ron Paul. He made a little bit of noise, didn't he?
Still making noise.
He's still making noise. And I remember when I first saw him, I was thinking, what is this guy talking? How is he a Republican and saying that we shouldn't be at war? I had some neocon tendencies back in the day. I'm not afraid to admit it. But when I was listening to him, I'm like, okay, he's kind of, this is kind of rubbing me the wrong way, but I can't really argue with it. That's the kind of noise you need to be making. You can't argue with anything he says. And you definitely can't argue with people who are fighting for the right of a pastor to feed the homeless, who are fighting for the right of a man to own and operate his bar without the government stealing it. That's how we get through action more than words. If we want to be valued, we have to be valuable. If we want to be valuable, we've got to make some noise. Thank you.